Gettysburg is filled with all kinds of stories of the major battle, the lines of men, the grand charges and assaults that happened out here and took place across these fields. But the stories I'm into are the individual stories of the soldiers that are out here. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about one of those soldiers. General Sickles is a Tammany politician. He's a man from New York. He is a child from a wealthy family. He's probably used to getting what he wants at all times. And he makes a pretty good name for himself prior to the illicit affair that his wife has and the subsequent murder that he commits. But the politician doesn't make friends very easily. He's got a lot of buddies that are in his inner circle. One of his friends happens to be Abraham Lincoln. But a lot of the soldiers that come to know him, they don't really respect him the same way that they respect a fellow soldier, because he doesn't play the game the same way. Out here at Gettysburg, he continues to do the same thing. He plays the game differently. Some people speculate that the reason why he moved his men out here to this ridge at the peach orchard was because he learned a lesson at the Battle of Chancellorsville. The odds of that, though, slim to none. Not only do I not believe that, but a lot of historians believe that that's just an excuse that a lot of people make up, speculation for his not following orders and not doing what he's told to do. Plus, Meade at the same time does not make it easy for a person to follow orders here at this battle. The orders that he gives Sickles is loose at best. It's really not very direct. At one point, he does give him a real direct order, which is to replace Geary's men and go to the location where he's at. But by the time Sickles decides to head in that direction and send his men out there, he can't find that location, or at least he says he can't. And probably because the officer that's in charge over there, who'd been ordered to go towards Culp's Hill, is getting impatient and tired of sitting over there when he's supposed to be in the action in another location. And so he pulls his men out, and he takes off and does what he's told to do. Sickles is headquartered past that barn over there, off in the distance. He's probably a quarter of a mile behind that. And then he finally slides up into position, and as his men are coming into position, they're in a straight line. And we'll take you over to the location here in a little bit so you can see what that line looks like. But it goes straight down Cemetery Ridge and heads towards the Little Round Top. Now, if Sickles goes out to that location, he's got a clear shot, a view of just about everything. Even with the trees leafed out, he can see Little Round Top is a very important strategic place. And he'll be able to see the wheat field, the peach orchard, the roads that are intersecting and coming in, and even Cemetery Ridge from where he's standing. He would be able to see all of that. But he doesn't do that. A lot of historians say they don't believe Dan Sickles ever went out to that location. Just like they also believe that Mr. Johnston from the Confederacy ever went out to that location either. So we have two people who essentially lie about their positions and where they're at, and report back information that's not true, but both of them have very different results. Sickles being over here in this location ends up bringing on a fight earlier and in a very different way than what the Confederates wanted to do. Longstreet himself even tells Sickles, long after the war is over, that Sickles may have saved the Union Army here because he brought on the fight by moving his men forward. Now, whether or not Longstreet really believed that, I don't know. I don't think Longstreet was the man that was the type to allow his officers to rebel against orders and not obey them. But they were friends after the war, and that's what he said about them. Now, I'll put up the map so you can see what I'm talking about here in just a minute, but directly behind me here is a road that goes in and out of Gettysburg. And this particular road here is one of the positions that Dan Sickles actually comes in through to see the location that we're at, the heights that are out here. He can see this when he's coming into town. Across the way there is where the Confederate line is, and if you look off in this direction here, there is an actual tower, an observation tower. Let's see if I can get that in the shot. Way off in the distance, right over there, there's an observation tower, and that's on the Confederate side. That's where you can go up there and take a look at all of this from a really decent height. Over in that location is where Sergeant Wentz would be stationed during a large portion of this battle here at Gettysburg. The Confederates are coming from over there, but their plan isn't to come across this field straight head on. Their plan is to sweep across the field behind me over here, where these farms are. They were to come across and then angle and turn and come into this direction, because they think that the flank is directly ahead of me over there, on the other side of the peach orchard. They believe that they're going to put enfilade fire down the line of the enemy and then cause panic and sweep the Yankees off the field. That was their plan. They did not anticipate that a two-star general is going to go against the orders of his commanding officer who just took over and push his man so far out front that he created a salient for the artillery sitting out here. And when they get to this location and they run into the 3rd Maine across the fields over there and the Berdan Sharpshooters, the reports go back to Longstreet and say, essentially, hey, we ran into people and it looks like the fight's going to come on sooner than we think. We've been spotted. So they go ahead and they plan for that fight. They now know that there's soldiers out here on this ridge. They now know there's artillery that they're going to have to deal with, and they're not sure exactly how far all of that happens, how far the men are pressed, because off in the distance over here, the wheat field, Pitzers Woods, and all of that, including the rocky stony top, is over here. Little round top is just past that, in the direction that I'm pointing, and then the big round top is over here. There's no way for them to see everything that they need to see. So it gets to be very hairy out here real quick. It's very tricky. Now a little battlefield orientation. Over here is Little Round Top. And if we come back around to the right side, you have Devil's Den off in this area over here, with the slaughter pen being right in that area there. Now directly off to my front here, it's this long slope you can see, and then a clearing off in the front right there. That's where the wheat field is. If you look off in the distance, that white picket fence that's way out there in the distance where the cars are going by, that's where Sherfy's peach orchard is. And then back here we have the Wykard farm, which is that small white house. And down this way is Cemetery Ridge. Now in a straight line from here all the way down is where Dan Sickles was supposed to place his men. And this was going to be the extreme left flank of the Union Army. And he was going to anchor his men somewhere in this vicinity. Had he come out to this area and noticed this little round top, then perhaps he wouldn't have been so focused on the peach orchard. But when Dan Sickles came into town and rode by that high ground out there nearer to the enemy, his main focus at that point in time was he needed to get his men to that high ground so that he could place his artillery on that position. And he stayed so silently and stuck, so focused on that position that he was blinded by what was happening around him. I'm at a location called Pitzers Woods now. The reason why I'm out here is to talk about the Berdan Sharpshooters. So the Berdan Sharpshooters, they were a special group of soldiers. And the reason why is because of their ability as a marksman. Hiram Berdan started identifying men who could be marksmen for this first U.S. sharpshooters group that he was going to bring to war. Well, one of the members of the Berdan Sharpshooters that fought out here was a man by the name of Corporal William Henry Leach. Corporal William Henry Leach was part of that first group of sharpshooters that came out here towards Pitzers Woods on the 2nd day of July, 1863, when they made the initial contact with the enemy out here. Now, William Henry Leach was in a Vermont unit, but he wasn't originally from Vermont. Originally, he was from New York, and he ends up moving to Vermont. And just like many of the men of his time, he volunteered to fight with the United States Army, and he was identified as a sharpshooter. And he comes out here, and he's part of that first U.S. sharpshooters out here in these woods where I'm at right now. And as they're making their way down towards this section of wooded area, they are skirmishers forward deployed from Alabama. Well, William Henry Leach and company spot them, and they start to fight. It's a heavy firefight that happens out here. The sharpshooters put up a heck of a fight, and they're shooting from line to line, tree to tree, and slowing them down pretty good, until finally Berdan decides that the fight can't go on. They're going to lose too many. So they start to make their way back across the fields behind me here and back towards their lines. When they start making their way back, that's when things go awry for Leach. As Leach is making his way back, he's shot not once, but twice. One ends up in his second from the bottom rib cage, his rib, and it ends up piercing his kidneys. And another one pierces his bowels. One of those bullets lodge into the meaty flesh around his spine. And he's unfortunately captured by the Confederate soldiers that are out here. Maybe it was fortunate after all, though. So off in that direction over there is a place called the Lutheran Seminary. The Alabamians know that there's a hospital set up there with their surgeons. They take Leach back behind their lines as a prisoner, and they bring him to that hospital because he's bad wounded. The types of wounds that he had were the types that should have killed him. The surgeons back there work on him and do everything they can to try to save his life, removing fragments of the bullet, taking care of his bowels, taking care of his kidney. But eventually, the battle out here is over with by the end of July 3rd, and the Confederates on the 4th have to retreat out of Gettysburg. As a result, there are Union and Confederate soldiers in makeshift hospitals out here all over the place that are wounded, bleeding, and dying. When the Union soldiers push forward to see what's on the other side, they find Leach in that Lutheran seminary, and he had been treated by one of the surgeons from the Confederacy. Well, thankfully for him, things turned out pretty good. They moved him out of here and sent him to another hospital where he received more treatment. After that, it was just a few months later when he was physically almost back to full health, even though his bowels had been busted open, his kidney was busted open, and he still had a bullet lodged in his back. It was so miraculous, in fact, that he ends up in a medical book about the War of Rebellion. And they talk about his miraculous recovery and the efforts that was done to save his life. Leach would go on to live a decent life. He would actually outlive his wife and marry a second time and have children with both of those women. Just goes to show, if you're mortally wounded, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to die. And his story did not end here at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Well, just like Leach's story has to end, so does this video. I'm out here in Pitzers Woods, headed towards the monuments for the Berdan Sharpshooters. And that's where we're going to close this video out at. Leach would close his life out in Elgin, Illinois. And he would go out there and marry a second time and have more children. And he bounced around for a little bit before being completely settled down. But he would continue on with the rest of his life, and his children would hear the stories of his wartime efforts as a sharpshooter out here at Gettysburg. And that was pretty much it for him. I hope you enjoyed the story about Mr. Leach out here at Pitzers Woods in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Until next time, this is History with Waffles.